This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, former fighter, part-time writer, try to be a full-time observer, joined by co-host Jack Hirsch, former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. Jack, how are you tonight?
Good, Frank. A lot of boxing to talk about.
I wonder what we're going to talk about.
A lot of explaining on this show. I'm very misunderstood.
All right, well, we'll get to that. Jack, there was a huge fight this weekend for the undisputed lightweight championship of the world between Devin Haney and Vasily Lomachenko. So I thought what we would do is, so we have clarity, we would break the fight down and talk about it as an outline. The fight, the decision, Moretti, a rematch, what the future holds for both. And I know you have something you want to get off your chest regarding Haney. So let's go. The fight, Jack. Because of the outrage over the decision and some of the controversy of the decision, what is being lost in the shuffle is that was a tremendous tactical fight from start to finish that had ebbs and flows. Neither guy ever looked like it was his fight for sure. There were a lot of adjustments. And I just think for a second we should talk about that, Jack, because that was high-level stuff all the way around, offensively, defensively, and, ring generalship and everything. And I think we should mention that because when you get the elite guys in there, that's what you get.
Yeah, it was. And like when you hear comments on the decision made, and these are people who I respect, they'll say Lomachenko was robbed. What an outrage. And other people who I respect are going to say Haney deserved the decision. And of course, plenty fall in between that. But you're right. It's a heck of a fight. But I think this one particular fight, Lomachenko and Haney, any way the decision would have gone, the excitement of the fight itself, would have gotten overshadowed by the decision and the debate who won. Had it gone to Lomachenko, there'd be a certain amount of debate, like in the Hagler-Leonard fight. We both think Leonard deserved a decision in that fight, but had Hagler gotten a split decision instead of Leonard, there would have been an outrage, whether Leonard deserved the decision.
Well, I think you make an interesting point because there is a one commonality with that fight and the Hagler-Leonard fight. But let me just say this. There were 3 swing rounds in the fight at least. If you give 2 of them to one guy, then there's your winner. However, tactically, I was a little disappointed in Haney, Jack, because whenever he took the lead, he got the better of it. But when he waited on Lomachenko, he got hit with really quick, flashy counters. And I didn't pick up anything that Haney was getting from his father in the corner. And all the rounds were close except the 10th and the 11th. And I'm a little disappointed in Haney because I thought the fight was there for him to win. And I just think tactically he let Lomachenko psych him a little bit. I think the shove may have meant something, that Haney was feeling the pressure. And I think he let Lomachenko take the play away. And what it has in common with the Hagler-Leonard fight is Leonard was a 4-1 underdog. Lomachenko was a 3-1 underdog. And it was a close fight. But what you come away thinking is, like Leonard, Lomachenko won the night. and he was more the show than Haney.
Well, I'm wearing a Loma cap in tribute to Lomachenko because I got to be honest about it. I thought it was going to be a resounding victory for Haney, 10 rounds to 2, maybe 9 rounds to 3. I didn't think it was going to be close. To me, this was a passing of the guard fight. The big name Lomachenko, a fighter who's on the decline, still a good fighter, but no longer what he was, against the Devin Haney, who I said, and I'll explain it later, I felt was going to be a generational talent. So I was disappointed in Haney's lack of dominance. So I expected a dominating performance. Even if you believe Haney deserved the decision, he didn't dominate the fight. And when the decision was announced, you just saw Haney jumping for joy, so excited. It wasn't like a fighter who felt he was going to get the decision. It was like a fighter who hoped he was going to get the decision at the end. And Loma showed he had a lot more left at the very least than what I thought.
Well, Jack, that's saying that a guy he may have one good one in him. I think that was Loma's. I think he turned the clock back a little bit that night, and I think he had his A game. I think he was in great shape. I think it turned out to be that he actually was the stronger guy. He was never in trouble. Not that Haney was in trouble, but Haney was hurt more than him. And I just think that Loma had one of his better nights that night. I mean, that was a formidable Loma. I don't know how many lightweights beat him that night, but that was his A game. I don't know if he can do it again, but he really did turn the clock back, and I think he overperformed.
No, I'm seeing some things on social media, Frank, that's saying that Loma's now a gatekeeper. And I hate to say this, Frank, that might actually be the case, because if he fought Tank Davis, chances are he's an underdog. Tank would be favored to win. We'd probably both pick Tank, I think, at this moment. If Loma fought Shakur Stevenson, Stevenson would be favored to win. I think we would both pick Stevenson. But if Loma is a gatekeeper, he's the greatest gatekeeper in the history of boxing. Greatest gatekeeper in history.
I'm not sure I totally agree with him being a gatekeeper. The only thing that keeps me from going all the way in on that is if you tell me Loma is still the guy that fought Haney, yes, I would pick Tank to beat him, and I would pick Stevenson to beat him. But Jack, I would not bet on those fights because he is that good. He is a real fighter. He doesn't roll over for anybody. He has a tough style to fight. He gets guys out of their game. And let's face it, Tank isn't experienced like Loma is, even though he's had more fights. Shakur quite hasn't been in with all the people that Loma's been in with. So I don't know if I want to call him a gatekeeper because I think he's still capable.
We know he's a great fighter, Lomachenko, but he's in and around a division with super fighters. You're talking about Tank Davis, Shakur Stevenson, and even Devin Haney. Okay,
I think Haney will be better off of this fight.
Right. But the point is, Lomachenko would be an underdog to all of them. But I don't think people can have it both ways in evaluating Devin Haney's performance against Lomachenko. If Lomachenko turned back the clock and he was a Lomachenko of old, what was so bad about Haney's performance then? He fought a great fighter.
And Jack
fought great. He fought pretty much on even terms, regardless of what you thought of the decision.
I had Lomachenko winning the fight 7-5. But I gave him the 12th round, which easily could have gone to Haney. If I give that to Haney, that fight is a draw. So let's discuss the decision. I have no problem with anybody who says Haney won the fight 7-5. As I said in the beginning, there were at least 3 swing rounds. If you give 2 of those to either guy, that's the fight 7-5. Okay. Haney did really good early. You know, he could have been up 5-3 after 8 rounds. If it's 7-4, there's your draw. If you have Loma up by a round, then there you go. It's his fight. But let's just put it to bed right now. Lomachenko did not get robbed. Do I think there's a slightly better case for him getting the decision than Haney? I do. And even though I picked Haney, I do think there's a better case that Lomachenko won. But when you have a fight 7-5 with 3 or 4 swing rounds, you can't say the fight it was a robbery.
2 things bother me. 2 comments made on each side after the fight bothered me. Lomachenko, in talking about round 12, said he took it off basically because he thought he was so far in front he had to fight locked up. I hate when fighters talk like that.
No, Ken Norton said that in 2 Ali fights.
Exactly. It's pure nonsense. You have to know, even if you think you're up 7-4, hypothetically, you don't take the last round off. And I don't want to hear, oh, I thought I won every round. You got to be a realist, okay?
Right.
And I can't believe that he would deliberately take a round 12 off, despite what he says. In other words, not go all out in round 12. And also Bill Haney, Devin's father and trainer, said after the fight, we don't want a rematch. We won clearly. No need for a rematch. Right off the bat, he's delusional. Bill Haney.
I think he came off looking bad, Jack, because I don't think he had a good night, and I don't think he did anything for his son when that fight was in the balance during the 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds.
Yeah. Okay, Lee Groves here. He had it 115-113, Haney, but okay with a draw, 115-113. Loma, I think that was a consensus across the board. But then we see, some people we respect, like our friend Ben Dowdy from England. He's calling it an outrageous robbery. Dennis Rappaport calling it an outrageous robbery. And then you see,
I don't see that, Jack, and I value both of their opinions. I don't see that at all. If you just tilt one of the swing rounds, I think what makes it appear that way is, and I agree with Joe Bergman, it is funny how the 35-year-old guy was stronger at the end than the 24-year-old guy. But if you I just can't see that being a robbery. The only thing that makes their case that helps them a little bit, Jack, there are 2 things. 3 things. Lomachenko had the bigger rounds, even though they weren't 10-8. The 10th and the 11th round, there's no doubt that he won those rounds. The other thing is he finished strong, and the fact that he was the underdog, and it looked like it was even bigger because everybody thought that he was going to be manhandled. So I think winning at the end, having the bigger rounds, and then the stench of Moretti, who we'll get to in a minute, I think those 3 things come into play. But I'm sorry, that's a 1-round swing fight either way.
Yeah, the perception is that Haney was the house fighter. That's the perception. That he was kind of the A side, Lomachenko's the B side. So the judges maybe just subconsciously, if nothing else, are going to lean towards him. Maybe they expect Haney to win. Like you're mentioning Dave Moretti, the judge that you're going to talk about in a little bit. From what Igis Klimas, Lomachenko's manager, claims, they didn't want him as a judge, and the Nevada Commission basically insisted on it. That's a very bad look for the Nevada Commission. And it's not so much his score, even though his 116-112 score in favor of Haney was really wider than anyone else. Everyone scoring for Haney had it 115-113. We haven't heard any 116-112s, but it was round 10 that Lomachenko seemed to win very, very clearly. How did he wind up giving it to Haney?
And Jack, therein lies the problem. He has 2 problems. He had the widest score, and I can't find, I think I could watch that fight 25 times and not find 8 rounds that Haney won. But am I going to call him or be really down on him for that? No. But the most dominant round of the fight, where I don't care who you are, how much boxing you've watched, I could have my fiance watch that round with the sound off. She has no time for boxing. She doesn't know, other than Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard and George Foreman, she doesn't know of any other fighters. and she could score that round and get it right every time. And those are the things that leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And it just happens that when it was on such a good night, there were some other good fights, and this fight was a high-level fight. Great stuff, elite fighters. You come away with remembering that. And it's like there's just no excuse for a 10-9 round for Haney in round 10. And I know Teddy Atlas likes to be Mr. See Me Out there and act like he is the voice of reason of boxing, but I agree with him 100%. Dave Moretti coming off the draw round in the Tank Davis Garcia fight, coming off scoring that second round even, and then scoring the 10th round of this fight for Haney. I really do think they need to sit him down and replay round 10 of last Saturday night's fight and have him justify and talk us through it in 30 or 20-second intervals and tell us why he marked it for Devin Haney. Maybe he can justify it, Jack. I don't think so, but I would like him to be under that microscope.
No, but boxing seems to always, when there's a controversial decision, it always seems to favor the A-side fighter for whatever reason. Always seems. I'm not sure what he had done with Haney Lomachenko. We could get back to it, but there was another fight the same day I want to mention where the A-side fighter lost a close decision. Katie Taylor fighting Chantel Cameron for all the junior welterweight belts, okay? Trying to be undisputed. She moved up in weight, and she was fighting in her home country of Ireland for the first time in 12 years, Frank. It was a homecoming, a big celebration. And I had it scored for Cameron 96-94. Two of the judges had it 96-94 for Cameron, and the third had it 95-95, which I disagree with, but was acceptable. So even though that whole atmosphere favored Katie Taylor, the crowd wanted her to win, they would have embraced the decision had it been given to her. The judges got it right. There was fairness, a rarity.
Well, then why can't Dave Moretti get it right?
Why can't who? Moretti?
What, Jack? Let's dive into that. Nobody watched that round and thought it was Devin Haney's round. But one of the three officials who's scored countless title fights, how could he make such a big mistake on that round on a fight so consequential to both guys' careers? How does that happen, Jack?
I'm going to say this. They use the same judges over and over in Vegas. And I'm okay with a judge having a rare off night. It has to be rare, because they're human. No matter what job you're doing, you're going to have an off night. I mean, Steph Curry, maybe the greatest shooter in NBA history, he can have a night where he goes 0 for 15, his first 15 shots miss. So anyone can have an off night on a given time. But these judges, they can't really afford it because you're messing with a guy's career.
Right. Jack, I can tell you this much. I could go on 48 hours sleep and score that round between round 10 and get it right. And this happens so much anymore. Jack, I hate to say this, but I'm almost starting to think there's got to be some kind of corruption. Nobody can be that inept.
Lee Groves just mentioned something, his last sentence about Moretti being 78 years old. When you get older, you tend to go to sleep earlier and wake up earlier. And these fights end later. Even the evening in Vegas time, 9, 10 o'clock, you normally, you're going to sleep around 9 o'clock Vegas time.
Jack, I had to fight myself to stay awake to catch it.
Right. And I remember Harold Letterman, the great Harold Letterman, when he was working not at HBO, was working actually a live show at the Garden. And I'm talking to him, and I could see it's the end of the night. He's very tired. you know. And if you're forcing yourself to stay up, you're not going to be so alert in scoring rounds. I mean, keeping your concentration.
Well,
I mean,
then get rid of him, Jack, because that's his job,
it
and
is.
livelihoods depend on that.
Yeah.
And you just can't make that big a mistake. And he's had 2 fights back to back where he's made big mistakes. But I have a bigger problem with round 10 of this past Saturday night than I do round 2 in the Tank Davis fight. All right, Jack, look, great fight. It was a great fight. I think Lomachenko did just enough to edge it. Not a robbery. It could have, Haney won the fight. He goes on. Do you think they'll fight again?
Haney won the fight. Lomachenko won the night. Maybe you
exactly. Yes.
Right. No. Before I comment on Devin Haney in full, as far as what I said about him being a generational talent before this fight, I do want to clear that up. I was disappointed in the attitude of not wanting to give Lomachenko a rematch. And not just that, Shakur Stevenson was in the ring after. He was eyeing Devin Haney. Now all of a sudden, Devin Haney has problems making weight. He didn't have problems making weight for Lomachenko, who he thought he'd beat decisively. But because he has doubts whether he could beat Shakur Stevenson, now he's moving up to junior welterweight. And if Teofimo Lopez beats Josh Taylor, Haney's going to fight Teofimo. It'll do really good business. And this way he avoids Shakur Stevenson.
Well, he better hope that Teofimo does beat Josh Taylor, Jack, because I would give him somewhat of a chance. But he will not beat Josh Taylor, and he will not beat Regis Prograis. So Haney is in a little bit of a conundrum, because if he doesn't want to see Lomachenko again, he's an underdog against Tank and Shakur Stevenson. So I agree with you. I don't think there will be a rematch. I'm not sure about Haney's future. He has some decisions to make. I will just say this. If Lomachenko and Haney were to fight again, who would you favor?
I would go with Haney. But
Okay.
I would, unlike this past fight, I'd have some reservations. I wouldn't pick him to win decisively. I'd probably pick him to win on points again, a close decision.
I would pick Haney to win for 2 reasons. Number one, I'm not sure Loma could be that up again. Nobody puts back-to-back fights together like that, especially at age 35. And conversely, I think Haney probably learned a lot from that fight. And I don't think it was a night where he lost his confidence completely. I think after he gets away from it a little bit, watches the tape, sees things he could have done. And remember, whenever he took the initiative and he didn't wait on Lomachenko, he got the better of it. And he also hit Lomachenko with some massive right uppercuts to the body that we don't know how they're going to affect him at 35 down the road. And Loma's face was pretty beat up after that fight. So if they fought again, I think the only obstacle Haney has is mentally, because I think strategically he can improve and he can see things that he can do. I don't think Lomachenko could be any better. That said, this is the moment everyone's been waiting for. Let's hear you justify your wrong claim about him being a generational fighter.
Wait, listen. Let me start off with one of your favorites, the Rocky movie. Remember they were in the office after Apollo had beaten Rocky in the first fight? And he said, Apollo,
I got the decision, but I didn't beat him.
They said to him, you got the decision. Well, Haney got the decision. He is unbeaten still, okay? When I mentioned generational fighter, everyone took it to mean an all-time great fighter, an all-time great. Generational is a couple of decades. That's what's interpreted about in his particular generation of a couple of decades. I meant Haney would be one of the big faces of boxing. Case in point, I don't think you would call Oscar De La Hoya an all-time great. I don't think you would do that, would you? But Oscar
No.
was
Borderline.
Os-
Borderline.
but he wasn't an all. When you talk about the all-time greats, you don't mention Oscar. Oscar's name doesn't come up. I mean,
Yeah. Again, I would hear a case for it, but I don't think I could be sold.
right. But Oscar was the face of boxing. He may have been the biggest generational fighter during his span that he fought in. Certain generational fighters are all-time greats. Roy Jones, I considered an all-time great, a generational fighter. I'll give you a couple of other generational fighters who are not all-time greats, unless you're going to rate them in their division. But I'm talking about pound for pound, just pure greatness, not within a division. Andre Ward, Joe Calzaghe. Great fighters, but not all-time great fighters. If you talk about the greatest fighters of all time, they're not on anyone's. They shouldn't be on anyone's radar.
Well, they're both on the top 5 all-time great super middleweights.
Yes, so you have to narrow them down to a division that doesn't have a rich history, okay, per se. But they were generational fighters, okay, during their time. James Toney. I think I think was a generational fighter. I mean, he was.
I agree with that.
Long time, but was he an all-time great on a given night? Yeah, of course, on a given night, but no, not for his career. And that's what I meant with Haney. I think Haney is going to be around when all is said and done, fighting at top level in big fights. Okay, the next 10, 12 years or so. I think he's going to be around a long, long time. And there are going to be some big wins during that time. And there are going to be some losses. Eventually he's going to lose 2, 3 fights. But I think he is going to be one of the faces, big faces during his generation. That's what I meant by a generational fight. And not an all-time great. And if I had any thoughts that maybe he could be an all-time great, I got to admit, they evaporated with the Loma fight. I don't see him entering Pernell Whitaker territory. I thought he might get in the backseat of Pernell Whitaker's car, before, that you could mention. I thought eventually you could maybe mention him in the same breath as Whitaker, even though you'd probably put him a little behind. I don't think he's ever going to fully enter Pernell Whitaker's territory. I mean, he might get to the corner of the block, but he's not going to get to the house.
Are you done?
I'm done.
I let you have your say. Can I have mine?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let's just assume that you're right, that a generation is 10, 12, 15 years. I think where we really disagree, Jack, is our definition of a generational fighter. To me, a generational fighter is a guy that comes along, and when you watch him, you automatically look at him and say, he's different. He's not like other guys. Leonard, Jones, Pacquiao, Tyson, guys of that ilk. I don't see that in Devin Haney. Is he skilled? Yes, but I could make a case that there are 2 guys in his weight class right now, and if I count Lomachenko, 3 that are ahead of him as far as being generational talents in Tank, in Shakur, and in Lomachenko. Again, Haney came up small in the biggest spot of his career, where I don't think generational guys do that. I think when you say somebody's generational, you look at them and you say, okay, this guy is going to be the goods. I think we see guys as talented as Haney come along every couple years. To me, that's not generational. To me, generational is, wow, that guy just blows me away. A novice could watch them fight and say, that guy's different. I don't think Haney is in that league at all, Jack. And after Saturday night, I've lowered him a little bit, and I would make him a significant underdog to 2 other guys in his weight class. So to me, there's no case he's a generational fighter. Gifted, yes. Title level, yes. But I don't think he's generational.
So you see Haney basically having a so-so career going forward. Is that what you're saying? Do you see him having?
Jack, I think he could win a belt again. Let me just say this. I think Boots Ennis has more of a case of being a generational fighter than Haney does. I think when all is said and done, we're going to talk a lot more about Boots and remember him more so than Haney.
Do you think Haney's career, Frank, is going to start going along the lines of Hector Camacho? Hector Camacho looked like he was going to be a generational talent. And
he did have generational talent, but it didn't pan out.
But you want to know something? Hector Camacho, as it turned out, was a generational fighter only in large part because of the charisma, because he created a buzz even when he started losing late in his career. I mean, the name was kind of magic.
Right.
You can project Russell. That's great promoter Russell Peltz. You project a fighter like you do a draft choice at times. Like we could project where we think Tank Davis is going to wind up. We could project where we think Shakur Stevenson's going to wind up. I mean, they still have a ways to go, but we could project.
But Jack, do you mean when you saw Haney fight, you looked at him and projected and said, this guy's going to be off the chart? Because I think when you say generational fighter, I think that's how people construe that.
I overestimated Haney's talent. I got to come clean on it. He disappointed me against Loma. I expected him to win. I expected it to go the distance, a dominating performance by Haney, where Haney was going to make himself one of the big faces in boxing. That's what I expected in his performance. And instead of making himself one of the big faces of boxing, we're talking about a controversial decision in this fight. We're talking about the judging again. I thought Haney would put it out of sight. He apparently isn't as good as I thought he was, but it doesn't mean he can't get to that place eventually. But he
could have a generational career.
If Haney says it's about legacy, if it's about legacy, fight Shakur Stevenson next. A fight with Tank Davis is hard to make. Tank's under house arrest. And it might take a little while. Shakur Stevenson was in the ring after. Did you see him eyeing Devin Haney?
Yeah.
With a devilish look. I kind of got a kick out of that.
That's just the world we live in today, Jack. You know, that's Shakur enhancing his brand. Let me touch on what Russell said. He said it's too early to judge these guys as generational. And I agree with that. But Russell, what I'm talking about is just their talent level, that when they come along and you say, wow. And that's when guys are calling you up and saying, hey, Russell, you got to come down and look at this guy at the 23rd pal. There's nobody like him. You haven't seen anybody like this. To me, that's a generational talent. Bernard Hopkins is a generational fighter, but no one looked at him and said he was going to hold the title and go undefeated for 10 years and have the career that he had. So, yes, you have to go by what they do in their career, but we're talking more talent. I looked at Sugar Ray Leonard first couple fights, and I said, this guy's one of the greats. I'm looking at one of the greats. Roy Jones, look at the talent. Cassius Clay, not so much him early, but he ended up being he was a generational talent as far as his skill level. You know, and there are other guys. I mean, Pacquiao, the same way. Mayweather showed signs of having generational talent, and then he went on to do it.
Let me cut in your favorite fighter, Mayweather. Let me cut in with him. Let's go back to the first Jose Castillo fight, when Mayweather won a disputed decision, much as Haney did against Lomachenko in this fight. They were saying the same things about Mayweather then that they're saying about Haney now. If you said at that time Mayweather, oh, he's going to be a generational talent, they would have laughed at you. You'd be taken to task.
Again, Jack, I understand that. But when I watched Mayweather at 130, when he first came under the pros, I looked at him and I said, this guy could be special. I think he has that kind of talent. I've never looked at Haney and thought that. Haney's not much of a puncher. He has a good jab. He doesn't put him together. And I saw in that fight, especially in that 10th round, When Lomachenko buzzed him, he became a different guy, and he didn't throw anymore. And Lomachenko sees on it and says, "Oh, okay, you have some doubt now. Well, let me give you some more doubt." And then he would open up with flurries on
Let
him.
me
So
ask you this. Camacho comparison with Edwin Rosario. Do you think it's the same situation that Haney got buzzed in a fight like Camacho against Rosario? And they say Camacho is never the same again. He got hit hard for the first time in his career. So he was really apprehensive.
well, Jack, we'll have to see what Haney does from here on out. I mean, that could be the case. And again, back to Camacho. Hector Camacho was no doubt one of the more gifted prospects I ever saw. Did it pan out that way? And did he realize all he could have? I don't think so. He let his weight get out of control. He partied too much. I don't think he got everything out that was there. But as far as a guy who could, as you said, like in the combine, go through the drills and do things that you look for fighters to do, Hector Camacho had it all, but he didn't turn out to be an all-time great fighter, but he had all-time great talent.
So
Mike Tyson had all-time great talent too, Jack, and he didn't hit his potential.
Does Haney turn out to be, and I'm going to give an example of a very good fighter, better or worse his career? Is he another Zab Judah?
Fair comparison. Zab had exceptional talent too, and for some reason didn't quite have the fighting IQ and lost focus a little bit. Haney could be that guy. It'll be interesting to see how his career plays out from here. But let me just say this. I believe that Boots Ennis has generational talent. When I watch him in the ring, I think, okay, there are not many guys that can do what he can do. I think when it's all said and done, we're going to look at him as being a generational fighter. I can't say that about Devin Haney, where I think Boots is one of the better prospects I've seen.
Boots didn't look good in his last fight. He laid.
I'm going to give him a pass on that, Jack. As you said, everybody has bad nights, awkward style.
But Frank, some other people watching it, if they heard you make the comment before the fight, Boots is going to be a generational talent, and then they saw that fight, they
have some reservation. I know that.
Doesn't know what he's talking about.
Right. But they have to know that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Let me say with fights being made, that generational talents too should take on the best fights. I like the way Haney went to Australia to take on Kambosos.
I love that.
But then, okay, he took on Lomachenko. It was the most lucrative fight at the moment. Highest reward, least risk compared to, let's say, Tank or Shakur Stevenson. So that's good business. But now, if he's going to be avoiding the top guys, then all their talk to Haney's about legacy being the important thing, it's a bunch of nonsense. You know, what's interesting, I mentioned Katie Taylor losing for the first time, okay? She's been, great women's boxer, Olympic gold medalist, unbeaten pro. As soon as the fight's over, it's a hard-fought fight. Eddie Herner, promoter, enters the ring, and he immediately says she's going to invoke the rematch clause in the autumn. I mean, sit down and talk about it. It's like the promoter knowing he wants to do business. He wants to make that fight. And of course, Katie Taylor's going to say, yeah, sure, I'll fight again. She's not going to say, I'm not, at that moment. But I regret, Frank, not texting you beforehand, because I had a strong feeling Katie Taylor was going to lose, because she looked a little, I didn't go on record as saying it, so I'm not going to take credit, because I didn't contact you with that before. But she kind of looked a little ragged in certain fights. But like I said, it was such a great action fight. And the women only fight 10 rounds, 2-minute rounds. They fight a total of 20 minutes compared to the men's 36. But the way the judges hit it in Ireland, Katie Taylor's home country, her homecoming, kudos to the judges. I'll say it for the second time on this show. I wish it happened more,
Jack, isn't it a shame, though, we have to praise them for doing what they should do? If you know boxing and you know what you're looking at, fights really aren't that hard to score. Some of them are, but it's not the most difficult thing in the world to do. It's when we get the decisions like Dave Moretti and saying all that baloney, scoring the biggest lopsided round of the fight for the wrong guy. That just turns people off. We get a night where we have two elite guys. It's a terrific fight, and that's what we're all talking about. I love the fight, and it goes to show when you have elite guys fight or you have equal guys fight, the best fighting the best. It's a beautiful sport. It is. It just doesn't happen enough.
Yeah, there's going to be another good fight this weekend, Frank. Lee Wood against Mauricio Lara, the rematch. And kudos to Lee Wood. He got knocked out by Lara, one punch in the 7th round in the first fight. Lee Wood was a little ahead, and he got nailed with a big punch. And he is going right in for a rematch.
Jack, isn't that somehow it seems the lighter guys are really, really tough, and they have no fear. And by the way, let's touch on something else. Did you see the Maloney fight?
Oh,
the Conte?
Devastating knockout.
Jack, I don't think I was that scared via a one-punch knockout. I mean, I might have to go back to Bob Foster and Mike Quarry, or maybe Leonard and Dave Green. That was scary. And I remember watching that fight, and I'm saying to myself, well, I know Maloney wants to go the distance, and he's earned that right. If I was in the corner, Jack, I would have been flirting with stopping the fight because he couldn't win. And then when the round started, I thought, okay, Nakani's going to box, and he's going to get through, and he's going to save face. But boy, what a hellacious shot. And let's just thank the Lord above that Maloney is going to be okay. And at age 32, I hope he doesn't fight anymore.
Yeah, I didn't have my friend Don Majeski, who's an agent for Maloney, the Maloney brothers.
Right.
He called me today, and I said, Don, I have to go. I'm going to speak to Don tomorrow. But I told him I'm sorry. It didn't work out with Maloney in his fight. And he said, yeah, he hopes he retires now. Because it really was a devastating type.
Oh, what a shot. And that kid Conte, or how do you say his name?
Earlier, but he was getting beat up earlier. It wasn't just one punch out of nowhere.
Right. Yeah. No, he was taking the thumping. That was, I was watching that fight, and I'm thinking to myself, poor Maloney. He's in the worst position a fighter can be in. In order to have success, he's got to take a pounding to get inside. And then when he gets inside, he doesn't even get the better of it. And the few shots he did land, it didn't seem that he ever really bothered the Conte. And I thought, I like this kid. I like his heart. But he's just in with a guy that is just above him. And he was a little overmatched. But it was a good fight. He never stopped trying. And let's just hope that he doesn't continue. Speaking of tough guys, Jim Brown, all-time great running back, passed away at 87 years old this past week. Jim Brown was a boxing fan. He was good friends with Muhammad Ali and George Foreman and Joe Frazier. He commentated. He helped Bob Arum sell tickets for the Ali Chuvalo fight. He remained close to Ali throughout his career. Give us some thoughts on Jim Brown. And let me just say this. He is the greatest running back and maybe the greatest football player of all time. And when I think of Jim Brown, Jack, you know what I think of as a fighter? I'm going to give you a hint. How many fighters have we seen in history who are great boxers and great punchers? I can only think of a few, but Sugar Ray Robinson, to me, is the flagship bearer for that, as far as being, he could outbox anybody and he could outpunch anybody. Jim Brown, as a running back, had Larry Zonka power with Walter Payton speed and moves.
He was an athlete way ahead of his time. I mean, just like Sugar Ray Robinson was way ahead of his time. I mean, he was decades. No one had seen anything like him when they came along. Jim Brown, Sugar Ray Robinson, good comparison. Jim Brown actually introduced Bob Arum to the business, okay? Made the contacts. And If it wasn't for Jim Brown, I wonder does Bob Arum ever get involved in boxing? Whether Bob Arum's career fully takes off. I mean, he did the Ali introduction, and that's what got Bob Arum into boxing. Okay.
And he wasn't a huge boxing fan before that.
No. He wasn't a boxing fan at all, I don't think, Bob Arum, hardly at all. And Jim Brown, interestingly enough, was a commentator for a lot of boxing matches, like in Zaire, Ali, Foreman. Jim Brown was a commentator for that.
He sat there with who did the commentary? Sheridan, David Frost, Joe Frazier, and Jim Brown.
Yeah, and Jim Brown, he developed a close friendship with Ali. And Jim Brown always wanted to box. I don't buy this nonsense. Well, Jim could have been heavyweight champion of the world had he taken up boxing. Jim might not have been more than a good 6-round fighter had he taken up boxing. We don't know. It doesn't.
Well, we know the story about when Ali heard that, and he goes, and they were walking outside somewhere, and apparently Ali said, "I'm going to stand in front of you, take your best shot, see if you can hit me." And Brown missed like 6 or 7 punches, and he said, "Okay, I'm not even going to try to be a fighter."
Yeah, but Jim Brown, it's interesting him being an analyst for these fights. Can you imagine someone like Patrick Mahomes sitting in the booth for pay-per-view show calling boxing matches? And but Jim Brown, he did love boxing. He was involved as a commentator, was very, very close with Muhammad Ali. So
Jack, I was telling you this before we went on. I met Jim Brown at the Ali Frazier 20th anniversary dinner at the I think it was the Bellevue, and it was myself, Davis Miller, Ali, Rockman Ali, Jim Brown, and Ali's mother was there, and I got to sit at the table with them. And he told us some good stories about Ali that, maybe I'll share it another time. But I remember before the Ali Foreman fight, there was a special that ran, I think, on the Sunday night before the fight. And Jim Brown was sent to both camps and sat down and interviewed both of them. And he said, Don King tried to talk me into getting into the ring and moving around with both Ali and Foreman. And he said, "I'll do it with Ali. He's my buddy. He won't try to hurt me." He goes, "But I'm not going to go anywhere near a boxing ring and get inside it with George Foreman in the other corner." And just the way he said it, you could just tell that aura of Foreman, that intimidation, that menacing presence he had, Jim Brown felt.
Yeah, definitely. There's talk, Frank, of for the upteenth time, Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence. I think it's worth a mention because I think it's realistic it can finally take place because both guys have nowhere to go. They really don't have anywhere to go after a while. So, and they've been talking to one another reportedly. But the question's this: has the fight lost its luster? It would have been massive had they fought last November. Now, I'm not so sure. I mean, there are bigger fights that could be made. If I gave you a choice, Crawford and Spence or Shakur Stevenson and Tank Davis, which would you pick?
I would only pick Crawford and Spence, Jack, because I think there's plenty of time for Tank and Shakur.
Well, you say there's plenty of time doesn't mean it comes off. Well, I'm thinking of an anticipated fight that you'd rather.
But Jack, I get your point. Look, you're totally right. I'm not. At one time, I thought about the fight, and I would be excited to talk about it. Right now, it doesn't even move me. I've seen all the little tweets and things where Errol Spence says they're talking on the phone, they're close, people are talking. Jack, it's been so long since they fought. We forget. I forget. And if they signed a fight and it happens this summer, how do you handicap that fight? How do we know what either guy has left? I don't know. I don't know. I have a hard time believing they're the fighters they were when we last saw them.
Well, that's it. Terrence Crawford's been so inactive. And it's, when I saw him fight from ringside in Las Vegas when he stopped Sean Porter, that was a year and a half ago. He's had one fight since, and I don't think he looked too good in that fight.
He got hit a
And
little bit.
And he's getting on in age. And how can I confidently pick him to beat Errol Spence now?
He hasn't fought since Ugas.
Yeah,
and he got a little stunned in that fight.
Well, he looked good all in all in that fight, I thought. But I just don't know. And then we're waiting. And then there's the Tyson Fury situation. Does he ever plan to fight? I get the feeling
Jack,
Tyson Fury doesn't want to fight.
I read the things that the old guard says, like our buddy Russell, and how they don't even follow boxing anymore. They only care about the history. And sometimes I want to say, there are some really good fighters today, and yada, yada, yada. But I can see why they come off that way, because none of these guys want to fight unless it's for millions and millions of dollars. They don't care who loses money on the fight as long as they're paid, and they don't do anything to build up a legacy or to get the people involved. I mean, again, a lot of people don't like Tank, but I will say this. Jack, the one thing he does is he fights, and he keeps his name out there. And Canelo does the same thing. So for all the warts that they have, you got to give him credit for at least keeping the game alive. They even said that about Ali in the 70s. Well, these guys aren't that good, but he kept the game alive and he stimulated the interest. Today, who does that? Look at Boots. Look at Boots. I clearly think he's a generational talent and may go down as a great, but he's sitting on the shelf. Nobody will fight him. Who knows what he'll look like the next time out.
Wait 1 second. You say no one's going to fight Boots Ennis. He can fight, but the paydays can't be so big.
Right.
He can keep busy. You talk about the biggest waste of talent in modern times. I mean, Demetrius Andrade. What a
another
waste.
guy. Yep.
He wasted his career. I mean, they feel entitled to a big payday, entitled.
Jamal Charlo's another guy who I think is a gifted fighter. Not generational talent, but he's gifted. He's fought, once in a year and a half? Get at it. I mean, come on.
Now, speaking of the Charlo brothers, Jamel Charlo, his fight with Tim Tszyu was put off. Tszyu's proceeding to have a couple of fights in the interim. Tszyu is on Charlo's trail. No fear of him. He wants to fight the worst way. And he said he saw Charlo out at the nightclub partying. This is what he heard and the whole bit. You kind of wonder, has the gap closed in that fight? I know you were picking Charlo without hesitation. Is there some hesitation now seeing Tszyu's commitment and maybe seeing Charlo's lack of?
No, but you have to think the guy that is active is going to be all he can be that night. And the guy who hasn't been active, we may have some questions about him, but I just think that Charlo's at the point, Jack, where if he just gets in shape, I think all the tools are there, and I just think he matches up with Tszyu. So unless he becomes, really, really eroded overnight, I gotta pick Charlo to win that fight.
Yeah,
but Tyson Fury is really he's infuriating because he talks more junk. He talks about MMAs. He's talking about fighting John Jones, and one day it's the middleweight Usyk, and then it's it's the bodybuilder Anthony Joshua. It's like he's just stalling his career. And what legacy does he have? Klitschko and Wilder 3 times. That's his legacy.
Yeah, it's going to play itself out by December. Supposedly in Saudi Arabia, there's a deal in place where Wilder's going to be fighting Anthony Joshua, but we don't know for sure. But now Eddie Hearn is backtracking a little bit by saying, well, maybe Anthony Joshua is going to fight in the summer after all against Dillian White. They fought many moons ago, and Joshua stopped him in 7 rounds, even though White wobbled him in the first round. And no one wants to see that rematch. Russell, with a late bulletin here. I didn't know that, Frank.
Yeah, I saw there was something about Boots in July. Thanks for the heads up, Russell.
Is that going to be a showbox show or what? I mean, you would think I wouldn't think it would be
Boots
Showtime.
fights on Showtime, so it probably will be Showtime.
Yeah, well, no, it is. He put Showtime, but he graduated from Showbox, basically. Yeah, but just keep busy. You know what I would have loved to have seen? We mentioned Terrence Crawford before. I would have loved to have seen this. Him go into Bob Arum's office when he was with Top Rank, saying, "Look, I know it's hard to get me the big fights. I have a gimmick that's going to go over well. I want to fight once a month for 1 year. The paydays are going to be a little lower, but for 12 months, I'll get my money over the course of
it's
a
never
year
going to happen.
because I'm fighting 12 times like the old timers did, once a month, but it's not going to be against steep competition. For example, it would have been Crawford against Louis Collazo, those type of fights.
Right.
You know, fights that he's clearly a big favorite.
We saw them in the 80s on ABC, CBS, and NBC.
Yeah, well,
Lee Groves, I agree with you about Charlo. He does have some lapses, but he's developed a nice left hook, and I do think, I just think he matches up with Zoo, because Zoo has to come to him, and I think that helps Charlo a lot. He walks into his power. Charlo can go with the left hook. He's got a good jab, and he can push it when he wants to. Jack, before we wrap it up, I put a post up about a week or probably this time last week, and it had Ring Magazine's top 10 heavyweights from 96 versus the current crop at 2023. And I noticed something. So let me run this by you. I was a little bit surprised how everybody reminisced about the 90s guys. And to me, after you match Holyfield Usyk, Tyson Wilder, Lennox Lewis, and Fury, I think the bottom 7, I think there were a lot of toss-ups there. So my question is, does it always look better looking back? And I wondered, in 2015 or 2050, the same amount of years between 96 and 23, 27 years, I wonder if people will be saying in 2050 how good Joshua and Fury and Wilder were.
I'm going to tell you, Lee, I'm not Lee, I see Lee's name up there. Frank, you put down Andy Ruiz would have beaten Ray Mercer. Andy Ruiz wasn't beating Ray Mercer. He wasn't going to hurt
Jack.
Ray Mercer. Come on,
Mercer sure gets a lot of mileage out of that Tommy Morrison win. There's a guy that was outboxed by Jesse Ferguson in his prime. I think that fight could go either way, but Ruiz has quick hands. He actually moves better in the ring. He's probably a better boxer, and neither guy can be counted on to come in shape. So I went back and forth. I give Ruiz the edge. Could Mercer win? Yes, but I don't think it's a lock either way.
The Ray Mercer that fought Lennox Lewis, is any version of Ruiz going to beat that Lennox Lewis?
Ray Mercer had a good night, Jack. No doubt about it. He had a good night. Again, if Mercer, I could see the case for Mercer. I just happen to think at that moment it was Ruiz. I think he's a little bit of a better fighter, but a wasted talent. But how many stinkers could I give you of Mercer? A lot.
Yeah,
and like Ruiz, he comes in out of overweight too.
Yeah, not only his career, his life seems to be in shambles from everything that
Andy Ruiz. Yeah, it's a shame.
A sad situation, but. Okay,
I'll tell you this much though: of the two of them, Ruiz has the bigger win, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, yeah, with Anthony Joshua, it was an equilibrium punch, but it's what it is.
Right, Russell, and that was a very, very close fight, and that was when Manny first got with Lennox, and Lennox was starting to, he was coming around the second his return after the McCall fight, and that was a tough fight. That was a triple header that night, right? Didn't Holyfield fight Ches? And what was the other fight?
Yeah.
I forget. There was another heavyweight fight on there. I forget who it was.
96.
May 10th of 96. Holyfield Ches, Mercer and Lewis. I thought another heavyweight fought on that card, but I could be wrong.
I was at that show, but I just can't remember it. what the third fight was. I mean, as soon as you tell me, I'll remember the fight itself.
Right.
Okay.
All right, Jack. Well, that about wraps it up. We got along a little better than I anticipated. I was going to jump all over you with your generational talent regarding Devin Haney, but you did a pretty good job of weaving your case.
I overrated Devin Haney.
Okay.
I'm clean. I overrated him.
All right. That's good enough for me. All right, Jack. Great show, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments, and we'll see you next week. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.